Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of BiblioTech On Air. I'm Rosanna.
I'm Ruby.
And today we are doing our Libros Libations episode. Our most recent read was A Massacre in Mexico by Anabel Hernandez. And a quick summary. On September 26, 2014, a party of students from the Ayotzinapa Rural Teachers College were en route to a protest when intercepted by local police. A confrontation ensued. Come the morning, the students were nowhere to be found. The crime that had transpired and the resultant cover-up brought the profound depths of corruption in the Mexican government and police force, as well as the vulnerability of ordinary Mexicans, into stark relief. Investigative reporter Anabel Hernandez reconstructs the terrible events of that night and its aftermath, giving us the most complete picture available. Her sources are unparalleled. In researching this book, she secured access to internal government documents that have not been made public and to surveillance footage that the government has tried to hide and destroy. Hernandez demolishes the Mexican state's official version of events, which the Peña Nieto government cynically dubbed the historic truth. As her research shows, state officials at all levels, from police and prosecutors to the upper echelons of government, conspired to put together a fake case, concealing and manipulating evidence, and arresting and torturing dozens of quote-unquote suspects, procuring forced confessions to back up the official lie. By following the role of various Mexican state agencies through the events in such remarkable detail, A Massacre in Mexico shows with exacting precision precisely who is responsible for this monumental crime and who needs to be held accountable. It's quite a lot.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
Okay, so getting started, we're going to get into some 1-star reviews, which not technically 1 star. I think the lowest I saw was a 3-star.
Which is pretty,
that's really good. It's a really good book. So, quote, Hernandez had a prestigious amount of research at her disposal, but rather than fashion it into a coherent narrative, she opted for a data dump that left me more confused than enlightened about what happened in Iguala, Mexico on September 2014. I found it almost impossible to navigate the maze of government agencies and officials, as Hernandez never settles for long on one character but always flies off into another impenetrable thicket. Why didn't she use the timeline at the end of the book as a narrative spine? And as for the central mystery of why the students were attacked and disappeared, she spends most of the book suggesting Mexican feds seized them as part of a long-running campaign to suppress left-wing activists, only to revert in a late chapter to the theory that a local drug kingpin ordered the seizure of the buses the students were traveling in because they were stashed with heroin, and police then took it upon themselves to disappear the students to eliminate witnesses. Baffling.
I can kind of agree with that.
Yeah, I agreed with it as well. When I was first reading it, I was like, oh my God, it's just so much data. Like, the makers of the buses, their license plate, the registration number, the direction they're traveling in. Like, everything is just so detailed. But she's a journalist, and you gotta admit, I mean, that's where she's just trying to prove that she's right and she knows what's going on. You know what I mean?
She did her research. Like, girl was on it. It is, in my opinion, kind of like a glorified research paper as opposed to, a coherent story, kind of like the review said. But I mean, that doesn't take away from the fact that girl did a good job at laying out what happened, and she came with the receipts.
Yeah, literally, this book is filled with receipts.
Yes.
So
overall, what do you think of the book?
I liked it. Like I said, it was a data dump, so it was kind of I'm dumb. It was kind of hard for me to follow through sometimes with all the information, but it was really just amazing. So graphic as well in some parts. What do you think?
I liked it. I enjoyed it. For what it was, it definitely provided a lot more light and insight into this. Because I do remember seeing it on the news years ago when it was happening. Specifically, them focusing in on the disappearance of it. Not because really it was just politics.
Like, boom, 43 people missing. It's like, bruh, how?
Yeah, like I remember it being pretty. It was a big thing, like on that portion of the news, because of course it was talked about mainly in the Latina news channels. But it does get a little repetitive at times. But overall, it's worth it. It's a very good read. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right into some of these questions. So starting off, what did you think about the students' annual rite of passage to commandeer buses and take them to Mexico City to attend the demonstration commemorating the 1968 local, I apologize if I butchered that, massacre? Do you think there was a better way of going about securing buses?
At first, when I was first reading, I was like, oh, okay, like they're breaking the law, you know, they are like hijacking buses and things like that. But when it's explained, you know, they are from a small town. I'm not giving any excuses, just giving some backstory. But they are from a small town, and they're a school, so their funds were only giving them one bus that didn't even have license plates and didn't even run. So it's like, how are they, you know, supposed to do what they need to do? Okay, so this school, their whole main ideology is that they are activists. They teach their students how to be activists, and one of their main important activities that they all do together as a group is to go protest on every October 2nd in Mexico City for the 1968 massacre, which, if you don't know, if you have not heard about the massacre, the Tlatelolco massacre was a military massacre committed against the students of the National Autonomous University of Mexico. And the reason being is the massacre followed a series of large demonstrations called the Mexican Movement in 1968, and is considered part of the Mexican Dirty War, when the U.S.-backed Institutional Revolutionary Party government violently repressed political and social opposition. So it's a lot. Like I said, for them hijacking buses, they did not deserve the fate that they indeed did. But I don't know if there's any other better way that they could have gone about securing the buses.
Yeah, because I mean, this isn't going to be a school that's like, you know, going to have the funding to get buses. It would be nice if at this point, you know, they have they're able to do that. But
it was like a known thing. Like
yeah, it's traditional at this point.
Like they would hijack the buses and the bus drivers, and like the bus drivers would be like, "Oh, I'm gonna drop some of these people off first, and then I'll go and drive y'all." Because you know they said they took care of their bus drivers, like they'll give them something to eat and things like that. And I guess I don't know if we're gonna get into it, but another thing to mention is that they were never armed. The only kind of weapons they would carry around to protect themselves would be rocks, like in their pockets. So it's not like they were holding a gun to the drivers' heads and hijacking the buses to take them to where they need to go.
Like, it's still probably a pretty jarring experience.
Yeah, it is.
But I mean, this tradition that's so integral to what their whole college is, you know, about. So it was something they had to do, and unfortunately, just like our next question says, they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. With that said, next question. Ultimately, it appears that the students were just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Do you think the cartel, state police, and military could have secured the drugs hidden on the buses without assassinating students? Couldn't they just have threatened them to shut their mouths and kept them alive?
So I was confused because when I was reading this book, I forgot that detail of the fact that the reason why all this happened was because there ended up being $2 million of heroin on one of the buses, which is the bus that is missing, correct? Well, there was $2 million worth of heroin on the bus, and so that's why the police took it upon themselves to go and, I guess, annihilate everyone. But I was confused because she goes into detail about the fact that the government was tracking the students like prior, like many years prior to this. They were not only tracking the heroin that was on the bus, but they're also tracking the students. So they were just like, everything kind of just magically lined up at once. So I was under the impression that the government was behind the students and trying to track the students for who knows what reason. And I was like, okay, they annihilated the students maybe because they're activists and because
like
of all their protests. Yeah, there you go. 2-for-1 kind of thing. Because I was like, I don't think they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think they were always looking at the students and looking at what they're going to do about the students.
Like, do you think it might have been like a trap set for the students in a way? Like,
maybe.
They just kind of colluded. And
yeah. Maybe like they could have set them up in a way.
Because they knew like the buses were going to get jacked. It is interesting though, because like, why specifically this group of students? Like, if it's a yearly thing, why not have it be the year before or
and
like, you know, a couple years ago?
Yeah, and
a
like
different group of students.
Another amazing thing that was like mentioned in the book was the fact that, let me pull it up because I have the highlighted portion. Okay, so in the book it says, under the category of priority issues, I found that the activities of criminal organizations such as the Sinaloa cartel and its boss, Joaquin Guzman Loera, El Chapo, considered the most powerful drug trafficker in the world, or the bloodthirsty Los Zetas and their then leader Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, remained unmentioned. So this is a little bit of context, when she was researching like kind of everything, like all the groups and everyone that the government has been keeping tabs on, the two main cartels in Mexico City, they were not keeping tabs on them, but they're keeping tabs on this group of students. So
like they labeled these students as like an actual like kind
threat.
of threat,
yeah,
as opposed to, you know, these
actual
massive cartels.
So that's like another thing where it just made me think, like, were they really just in the wrong place at the wrong time? I kind of think they've been targeted.
And it just kind of all came together for them.
Yeah, I just think everything kind of came together at once.
It's kind of hard to think about it, though. Like, on one hand, maybe they could have unloaded the buses and just been like, shut up and end it there.
Because,
but
there's like countless videos, and even in the book, she mentions that the students were like, we are unarmed. We are unarmed. Please stop shooting. You killed one of our people, like, on site. He needs a hospital. Or, like, there's all these injured people. They need hospitals. Please call an ambulance. Like, why are you aiming at us? Why are you shooting at us? We have no guns.
The author mentions the town of Iguala was empty and silent when the students were being attacked. Residents of the town kept quiet and away from what was going on outside of their homes. Even stores refused to provide the students with food and water. Do you think more people in town knew what was going on? Is it possible that some of the residents were colluding with the cartel, local police, and military? This was a very good discussion question at Libros. Because it kind of went beyond the book.
I like Romeo mentioned, he was like, the humanity in me would be like, yeah, I'm going to open up my home and like let you guys in. But like when there's so much chaos going on and you don't know who's in the right, who's in the wrong. Right. I was like, me personally, if I was in there, unfortunately, I'm sorry, I don't know if I would open my doors to help some people, because it's just like literally chaos going on, a whole massacre.
Like, it does mention that there are some people who did, and they ended up saving a lot of the students. I think it was like 60 students that ended up hiding in some of these houses.
And those people who did, they're straight up heroes because they put themselves at risk. I mean, I don't know if they knew at the time that the cartel like had some like there's like a lot of fishy stuff going on, because they easily could have gotten in trouble for just helping people out. Yeah,
which kind of makes you think, like, was it really the cartel after all, or was it more like
the government? Yeah, because they were just trying to pinpoint this whole mess on anybody.
Yeah, because one of the parts that really stuck with me was when they mentioned like one of the people that did let some of the students in, like she kind of like just made the quiet sign, like finger over her lips, and then just had like the students quietly come in. Like, I'm like, dang, that's such a
I don't know if it's mentioned in the questions later on as well, but I think it's crazy too, the fact that the whole time the government just kept trying to say, no, the army wasn't there. The army wasn't there. It was just the police. Because witnesses in that area were like, oh, yes, there was police there. And then there was other people who were dressed in like civilian clothes.
Right.
But then like some of the neighbors there or something made a comment. They're like, they were just in civilian clothes, but they were so precise. Like they seemed very trained. And because the whole time they're like, no, the army wasn't there. They didn't show up. And then later on, Anabel Hernandez is writing. Yes, she was like, they did a ballistics test, and they were like, these guns, these bullets, these like weapons that were at the scene, the army is the only people who have access to them. Yeah. No one else has access to them. And she's like, they were there. And the fact that also the army, they're the first people to know about everything that's going on in the city as well. They knew, just like they knew what was going on.
But and I think there's also a bit where like she's talking to some of her sources or whatever, or I don't remember who they're talking to, but they mentioned like, oh yeah, I think they're being kept at like some kind of 27th Infantry Battalion or something. And it's like, bro, you gonna say the army's not involved in all of this? Like, come on, the proof is there.
Literally.
Again, they don't care about that though. It was just whatever story to cover it up and go on about.
I don't know if it's mentioned in the later questions as well, but another thing that blew my mind was the fact that there was like footage of like the police putting the students into these trucks, laying down stacked on top of each other, and then like the footage just ends like that.
If that's not telling, you know. But real quick, going back to the end of that last question, I think some of the residents in that town, they not necessarily work with the cartel, but they are kind of part of that.
I'm sure.
Don't tell, don't ask, don't tell kind of thing.
I was like, I'm sure. I mean, the way that they covered their tracks, like during the scene when the police were shooting, after they were like shooting people, they were picking up the bullets off of the floor. I'm sure they went in and covered their tracks and talked to the neighbors, like, don't say anything.
Yeah, or just kind of, threaten them a little.
Yeah, definitely. And we will be back after these messages. Check out our next Libros and Libations pick, Rules of Prey by John Sanford, available on Cloud Library for free with your BiblioTech library card. This #1 New York Times best-selling author John Sanford's haunting, unforgettable, ice-blooded thriller that introduced Lucas Davenport. The killer was mad but brilliant. He left notes with every woman he killed. Rules of murder: never have a motive, never follow a discernible pattern, never carry a weapon after it has been used. So many rules to his sick, violent games of death. But Lucas Davenport, the cop who's out to get him, isn't playing by the rules. Check this book out today and meet us at Burleson Yard Garden on July 1st at 6 p.m. We'll see you then. And now we're back.
So with that, let's get into the next question. Okay, so let's talk about what the author uncovered in her investigation regarding federal authorities. She claims that President Enrique Peña Nieto knew the official story that was put out to the public was not true. She also claims that the federal police and high-ranking military officials were involved with helping the cartel secure their heroin inside the buses. How does that make you feel about the Mexican authorities? Do you feel that most officials in Mexico are corrupt, or do you believe that there are more good people than bad over there?
Unfortunately, there are more bad people than good people.
At least in government and the politics there.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is mostly corrupt. I mean, she goes into details about the backstory of the mayor that was there at the time, the general, the president, their backstory, and all of the
like the attorney generals and
shady
stuff
that shady stuff that was going on in their personal lives. Even the fact, I don't remember if it was the mayor, but there was one where his brother-in-law was in the cartel, and they're like
that was the wife of the mayor, I think.
There's someone that had some ties to the cartel, and they're just straight up like, nah, I don't have that. That's got nothing to do with me, you know. And it's like, bro, how?
Proof's right here. Just, nah, that's not me, man. That's not me.
And they just kept trying to pin it on, like, they were straight up torturing people, and telling them, you have to sign this confession saying that you were like a part of it, or that you were the people who called out this attack.
Yeah, it wasn't just like threatening them into the confessions, like
straight up torturing. Anabel Hernandez goes into depth about like the dungeons in Mexico, about the ways they tortured them.
Yeah,
and
very violent,
very violent,
gruesome.
And the fact that some of these people were like not even anywhere near there. They're just regular civilians out in the street who were like on September 26th were just like at home celebrating their like children's birthday, but they grabbed them and tortured them and are like, no, you're gonna sign this confession saying that it was you who like planned this heist or attack.
Yeah,
it's just so wild. So it's just like right all there. How is this not just beyond corrupt, you know?
Yeah, like it definitely does them no favors. And some of the things that we heard at Libros too, like not just, related to this, but how, if you get pulled over by a police officer, you can just pay them off, So something minor like that, yeah, I mean, sure, whatever, corruption. But this, if that just cements it, especially seeing how far it goes up, like up to the president at the time. And not, as with what we know, he was not a great president.
Yeah.
He was not a great president. His presidency definitely had quite a few scandals. But the corruption just goes high up that ladder. All right, next question. Do you believe the Mexican government's official narrative of events that took place that night? The narrative is as follows. Its story was that the students had inadvertently hijacked a bus packed with heroin being smuggled by a cartel in cahoots with the local mayor, his wife, and the local police. The quote-unquote disappeared students were handed over by the police to the cartel, executed, then burned in a quarry. Their ashes disposed of in a river.
Oh man, like the possibilities of them, because obviously in the end the Mexican government is trying to be like, look, like they were they were burned. Here are the ashes. They were thrown in a lake. That's what happened. But actual fire experts were like, the possibility of that burning 43 students. Do you know?
A short amount of time.
And I was watching the documentary, and they had actual visuals where they're like, it takes like 12 hours for like one person to be burned fully, like to the extent that they were literally burned to where no DNA was possible to retrieve from the ashes. And they're like, how many logs would it take? How many tires would it take? And then they show on the screen, like for a whole 43 students, it was just like a screen full of tires and wood that it would take, and they would need to be burning for like more than 60 hours to get to the finite ashes that they had in the bags. And they're just like, and it was raining that night.
On top of that.
And like the area where they said that supposedly they burned where the students were burned took place, there was still like tree stumps that were still there. They're like, if it really happened right here,
it would have spread.
It would have spread. The tree stumps would not be here. Why are they here? You know,
or there would be some kind of like, you know, suit or you know, scarring from the fire.
But there was no evidence of anything like that.
Like they just said, we scooped their ashes into trash bags and sent them down the river. But it doesn't make sense.
It does not make sense. There's no way this narrative is any close to right.
It was not possible. And pretty much everyone at Libros was of the same sentiment and brought up the same arguments. Like, you can't burn that many people that quick in, you know, a span of a few hours. It was raining. It just does not make any sense at all.
It does not add up.
Anabel Hernandez is as brave as any other human being out there. Risking her life, she wrote this story to show the world how deep the corruption in Mexico runs. Had she not covered this story, the disappeared 43 students would have probably been forgotten by now. How hard do you think it was for her and other Mexican journalists to investigate this story? And do you think it's even worth becoming a journalist in Mexico these days?
Man, that's the journalists in Mexico, they're a whole different breed, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
They're doing like the Lord's work, because I can't imagine, because at the beginning of this book as well, Anabel Hernandez talks about how she fled Mexico because she was concerned for her safety.
Yeah.
Like she was threatened.
Her and her family.
Yeah, her and her family were being threatened. So she had to leave Mexico, and then she comes back to like do her research and investigate it for this situation.
And it was a lot of work that went into it.
Yeah, obviously. So it's just crazy. I just can't even begin to think about, because she just dives right in and gets to the backstory of every single person that's corrupt, that's very high in the office. I'm like, girl, how is she still alive?
No,
after writing this?
Because like some of the people she talks to, like some of her sources are, you know, alluded to be from the cartel themselves. And that's just, like you said, Mexican journalists are a whole different breed. Because if we think like our journalists going into war zones or, you know, being in certain weather affected areas have it bad, then they're, you know,
I mean, all journalists are, they're there to let the people, you know, do, like, the people just have to know, even though they're just, the government's consistently trying to shush them and trying to prevent that. They're just still so dedicated to make sure that the truth, you know, gets revealed.
Yeah, and as far as we know, like her story or her research is kind of what kind of kept us alive. Because doing, you know, looking into other articles and stuff or looking up other things in relation to this, there are other groups and similar independent journalists who did their own research or did do a deep dive into this story. But it just seemed like Miss Hernandez's work was the one that comes to the forefront. Like hers is the one that just took a little bit from everything and just complete, you know. But yeah, shout out to all of our Mexican journalists.
Was there any other final thoughts that you wanted to add?
Just that this is, I think it's worth your time checking out this book.
It's definitely worth it. Like, even though we mentioned this is just a data bomb, it's very well, I feel like everyone should read it, because she just, like I said, goes into depth about all of the corrupt, like some of these government officials, how they own clubs, and horrible things happen at these clubs, gang rapes, things like that.
And it prompts you to do your own research, like after reading the book or while reading the book. Like, you're more than likely gonna look up other articles, or maybe like what happened with the documentaries. Look into the documentary you mentioned on Netflix, as well as the one about the monarch activist.
Yeah, definitely. Because I felt like that one tied in very similar to this one as well. Just the fact that it's known in that documentary that the police are involved in forced disappearances. All these, it names so many environmental activists who were just offed, you know, for just trying to stand up to help the environment, to help the community. They're just exactly. How are you gonna hurt the butterflies?
Like, I feel bad enough hitting the butterflies on the highway when I'm driving. I can't imagine, you know.
But yeah, that's it. Just leaving it on that note.
Cool. So with that, thanks for joining us for this discussion of Libros and Libations book. Again, that was A Massacre in Mexico by Anabel Hernandez, available both on Cloud Library and Hoopla. Make sure to tune in for our next episode. That's going to cover Rules of Prey by John Sanford. This one is a thriller, kind of like a serial killer thriller type book. So it'll be our first dive back into fiction in a while. So it should be exciting. Again, make sure tune into that episode. And if you want to join us at Burleson, feel free to do so as well, where we talk IRL about this book. But yeah, that's it. So I'm Rosanna.
I'm Ruby.
And we'll catch you guys on our next episode.
Bye.